See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to GB News on your TV and on your digital radio. I'm Calvin Robinson, covering for Nana, at least trying to. No one can cover for Nana this week. So over the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be talking about some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and it's yours. We'll be debating and discussing, and at times we'll be disagreeing, but nobody will be cancelled. Joining me today is the leader of the UK Independence Party, Neil Hamilton, and broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. Before we get started, let's take a look at the latest headlines.
Thank you, Calvin. Good afternoon. It is exactly 4 o'clock. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The Chancellor has warned middle-income earners could be among those struggling to pay their energy bills this winter. Nadeem Zahawi says he's concerned about people who aren't on benefits, telling the Daily Telegraph those earning around £45,000 a year may need government support. It's after Ofgem announced an 80% hike in the energy price cap to over £3,500 from October. The cost of living crisis will be a priority for the next Prime Minister. Conservative MP Robert Halfon told GB News Rishi Sunak has a proven track record of helping the country.
I do believe that his track record shows that when it counts, he does help with the cost of living. The government spent £37 billion. It's a huge amount of money, especially with the current spending pressures, to try and help people over the next few months. He acted properly when times were tough. If we didn't have the furlough scheme, my constituents would have become destitute. Our businesses would have closed.
Policy Director of the Centre for Social Justice, Joe Shallum, believes the current support package doesn't go far enough.
What we've been doing at the Centre for Social Justice is looking at the hit to incomes, particularly those on low incomes, over the autumn and winter period. And what we found is that even when taking into account the existing support package, which is hugely welcome in so many ways, we're still seeing considerable falls in the real incomes of those who are already struggling, frankly. Where we are now is a very, very different picture to where we were when the calculations were made about what needed to go into that package. And it's really urgent that we update our cost of living policy response.
Police say silence is not an option as they appeal for more information on the shooting of Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool. The 9-year-old was killed in her own home on Monday night. A second man is being questioned after being arrested on suspicion of murder yesterday. Police also released a video showing another arrest with a 36-year-old man from the Heighton detained on Thursday. They're urging people with names to come forward to help their investigation. The Met Police will be investigated following the death of a man in Kingston in southwest London. Officers were in the process of making an arrest following an allegation of theft when he entered the River Thames last night. His body was recovered 2 hours later. Police say he wasn't in handcuffs. The incident has been referred to the Independent Office for Police Conduct. 3 years after he was killed in a crash, the family of Harry Dunn say they miss him terribly. A memorial ride has been staged at the US Embassy in London to mark the anniversary of his death. The 19-year-old was killed when his motorbike collided with a car, which was allegedly being driven on the wrong side of the road. American Anne Sekulas was charged with causing death by dangerous driving, but was allowed to leave the country because she had diplomatic immunity. Well, his friend Zach Veldkamp says the fight for justice continues.
It's almost gone from the initial sadness to being pulled along and strung and continuously pulled out, so the sadness continues. And it's almost like, when is it going to happen? Moving forward, I think there will be more protests. We will continue. We won't go silently, and we won't let it be swept away.
The government has announced a £56 billion plan to crack down on sewage spills. Under the proposals, water companies in the UK will face tough targets to minimise pollution. It's after dozens of warnings were issued for beaches and swimming spots across England and Wales last week, following heavy rain that overwhelmed sewage systems. Campaigner Fergal Sharkey has criticised the way the government's handled the problem.
Over the last 2 years, we now know water companies have spent almost 6 million hours on over 775,000 separate occasions dumping sewage into the environment. I'm afraid government's response to this is, quite frankly, a shambles. It is, in my personal opinion, probably the greatest act of violence I'll see committed against the environment, certainly in my lifetime.
And a car once owned by Princess Diana has sold at auction for £650,000. The black Ford Escort RS Turbo, which was driven by Diana between 1985 and 1988, was initially expected to fetch around £100,000. Silverstone Auction says the RS Turbo Series 1 was usually made in white, but the Royal Family Police Guard asked for Diana's to be painted black for reasons of discretion. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Calvin.
You are with me, Calvin Robinson, covering for Nana this week on GB News on TV and on digital radio. Can we have an honest conversation about immigration? We're seeing record highs of both legal and illegal immigration. Almost 1,300 migrants crossed the English Channel in a small boat last Monday, setting for a new record for crossings in a single day, according to the Ministry of Defence. It's the highest daily total since current records began. More than 22,560 people have journeyed across the English Channel so far this year. That's nearly double the number from last year. Let's look at the wider immigration picture, though. The number of student visas and work visas being issued is on the rise, as is the number of asylum applications we've approved. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't do our bit. I was one of the first to say we should allow Hong Kongers to settle in the UK when the tyrannous Chinese Communist Party made it clear that they would no longer stick to the idea of one country, two systems. These would have been considered Brits until fairly recently, and it's a crime that we left them in the hands of a wicked Chinese regime. In general, I think most people would admit it's fair we help out where we can, but the truth is we are over capacity. Our NHS, is apparently on the brink of collapse. Every winter we're told this, and our government seems to agree. We've had our civil liberties taken away from us continuously over the past 2 years in order to protect the NHS from imploding. Yet somehow they think it can sustain an ever-increasing population. As a former school leader, I can tell you that schools are struggling too. Class sizes are growing, children aren't getting the attention they need or deserve, and schools are having to find new ways of teaching algebra to some kids that sometimes don't even speak a word of English. We have a growing number of immigrants choosing the UK as their destination. I can't blame them. This is one of the greatest countries in the world. Why wouldn't you want to live here? But these things have to be considered in a fair and impartial way. I believe that we should consider just allowing in the people with the skills and talents that we need just to keep this a strong nation. But of course, there's a difference between a refugee, someone fleeing for their life, and an economic migrant. It's time we woke up to that distinction. The stats speak for themselves, really. Most aren't women and children. More often than not, most of these are strong men. And I can understand why we would consider homing women and children, and the elderly and the vulnerable, but perhaps we should encourage these strong men to make a difference in their homeland instead. maybe we could look at this another way. Birth rates have been on the decline in the UK since the 1960s, and I reckon that's in part due to the sexual revolution. Sex became a commodity, entirely about personal pleasure, no longer primarily about love, procreation, family. I believe that it's down to us Brits forgetting our moral obligation to maintain our culture, to start a family, and to build and maintain communities. We also need to stop being so snobby about technical vocations. If we encouraged our young people to take up vocations, and if, as a society, we considered those vocations as important as academic qualifications, we wouldn't need to import all our skilled workers. In my opinion, we can't sit around moaning that British values are being undermined and that British people are being replaced and that Britain is being changed. Yes, the government needs to cut immigration, but it's up to us to make a difference. Get married, start a family, and encourage our young people to take up a vocation. Many of us are tired of waiting for the government to act. It's time we took back control ourselves. It's on us to shape the future of our great nation. Before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. Coming up at 5 o'clock, it's Difficult Conversations. Today we're looking into discipline in British schools. Ofsted has rated a school inadequate after being deemed too strict. Parents claim the secondary has become an army camp where children are terrified. So it begs the question, how strict is too strict? And in the great debate this hour, I'm asking, should the UK ban smoking? According to a recent study, half of Britons believe that the legal age of smoking should be raised to 21. But should smoking be outlawed altogether? Smoking costs the NHS approximately £2.4 billion every year, but an outright ban could be problematic. The government would lose £8.8 billion in tax revenue and would infringe upon people's civil liberties, effectively turning the country into a nanny state. And at the end of the hour, it's Royal Roundup. Royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams will join me to discuss the launch of Meghan Markle's new podcast, and we'll also be discussing Prince Harry taking a private jet for a one-day polo match. That's coming up in the next hour. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing today by emailing gbviews@gbnews or tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's get started. Welcome again to my panel. We've got the leader of the UK Independence Party, Neil Hamilton, and broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. I'm going to take a brave stance here and ask the UKIP leader his stance on immigration. What are your thoughts?
Well, I don't think people have woken up to the scale of what's been happening in this country. You know, since the year 2000, our population has increased almost entirely from immigration alone by 7 million people. We have got a housing crisis in this country. It's because we're not building enough houses to accommodate all the extra people that we're importing every year, 250,000, 300,000 a year. Between 1980 and 2000, the average net migration was 80,000. Since 2000, it's been nearly 4 times that, 300,000 a year. So it's all coming to England, by the way, and a lot of it to London and the South East. I mean, London's population has gone up by 2 million in this century, and this has brought all sorts of complications in its wake. You know, schools, transport, health, all the pressure is being felt everywhere. And that's the legal migration. We don't know actually how many illegal migrants are coming in, but the figures that you quoted a minute ago of the boat people coming across from France this week, as a comment, no doubt, upon the Macron government in France, and they can't stand it there, they want to come here. Yep. But to my mind, that's not a justification for seeking asylum here, because they don't like President Macron or the French social security system. But that, I think, underlines and dramatises the real problem that we've got from a government that has utterly failed and has no will to control our borders, which was the mantra of the Conservative Party from 2010. And remember, they said that they would cut net migration to less than 100,000 a year, and it's been 3 times that figure during every year that the Conservatives have been in office. Right. So they don't want to do anything about it. They haven't got the cojones, as the Spaniards say, to do anything about it. And I don't believe that even with the emphasis that we've heard in the leadership campaign, that either of the 2 candidates actually is prepared to take the tough decisions and action that's required to stop this nonsense.
OK, so that may be the case. Lizzie, we've also had the situation in Ukraine, Afghanistan. We've been taking in refugees from Hong Kong as well. Is it that simple? Can we just cut migration, or do we need to also be looking at helping people where it's needed?
Well, we've got to help people where it's needed, obviously, like the Ukrainians, obviously. But this is unacceptable, and it's an overt abuse of our immigration laws. We need to. I mean, 800 people came over just on Thursday, and we need to get Rwanda started. We need to leave the European Convention. We can't be ruled by a European judge. Let's get that plane started and get them processed. That's what we need to do. But sadly, we've got a zombie government. There's no one running the government, because this is what I'm saying. I think Rishi should actually throw the towel in, and we all know that Liz Truss is going to be our next Prime Minister. I think he should throw the towel in. We need a Prime Minister now, and we need this sorted now, today.
But Neil, there's two sides to this issue, isn't there? So there is the case that immigration numbers have gone up dramatically and the population has risen almost 20 million due to immigration. But the native British population has only risen like 3 million in that time. So we're not producing, we're not reproducing.
Well, that's certainly true. There's not a lot I can do about that, I think.
But is that not part of the problem? We're not starting families ourselves.
Yes,
so
I agree.
People have to come from somewhere.
I mean, the elephant in the room, which of course nobody really wants to talk about, is the cultural and societal changes which immigration, at such a scale and in such a short time frame, has brought. I mean, most of our big cities in England now are monocultures, but not recognisably British monocultures. And everybody talks about immigration bringing diversity, but actually what we've got isn't diversity. We've got monolithic groups and groupings of people within the country, so that on the face of it, Britain is a more diverse place, but actually on the ground, it isn't.
OK, so we both recognise the problem, but I would say we come to it from a different angle. I wouldn't say we have a monoculture, even in London. I'd say actually we have multiculturalism, and that is the problem. But diversity isn't a strength. Actually, British culture isn't the predominant culture anymore because there are so many disparate groups with their own cultures, and there's no integration. Would you recognise that?
I do, and let's talk about the Islamicisation of the West. I mean, this is the fundamental challenge which we do face, I think, in the immediate future. And it's not something that we can shy away from, in my opinion, particularly because there are so many extremists that want to change our society in the direction of their mode of travel.
We had an Islam-heavy conversation yesterday, so I do want to keep it on to immigration specifically. Lizzie, what do you think about the cultural problems in the UK? Are we too diverse? Is there a problem with identifying what British culture is?
Well, there is in some ways, Calvin. I mean, I've got to say, I've got my friends, kids are at school at the minute, and they're just saying, look, they're just getting held back from kids that aren't, as you said earlier, knowing the English language, getting pulled back. The other classmates are getting pulled back. And as you say, look at the NHS, it's on its knees. It's, we haven't got the capacity to help this amount of people coming in. We've got to be tougher, we've got to be stronger. And yet again, I'll say it again, get Rwanda started. They really need to. This government needs to do something now.
Immigration is certainly a hot topic, and it's certainly one that a lot of Conservative Party members have been saying they want to see addressed. But at the same time, we could also say that England has always been a very welcoming country to different people from around the world. So how do we address the balance?
Yeah, I don't believe that we should be rude to immigrants. It's immigration as an abstraction which is the problem. Individual immigrants are human beings like the rest of us. And it's not their fault they want to come to this country to better their lives. Who could quarrel with their reasoning? Particularly given the nature of some of the countries in Africa and Asia that they've come from. But that's not the same thing as seeking asylum. When the asylum conventions were written just after the war, it was to prevent political persecution or religious persecution, that people were given the right to come to other countries as an exception to the immigration rules which existed at the time. The trouble is that in 1967, a new protocol was added to the UN Convention, which was never debated, as far as I'm aware, in the House of Commons, let alone legislated for, which effectively threw open the floodgates. Anybody can now claim asylum in this country because of gang warfare or endemic violence in their country, which has nothing to do with government policy.
But Neil, you've got to come through the right measures, don't we? We can't come dangerous over our channels, over the sea, where, we're losing lives. It's dangerous.
Well, is part of the problem that Brits aren't willing to do the jobs that other people are willing to do?
Well, no, I think we should support our own. If we were paid better, you know, we would have,
if we weren't undercut.
Exactly. We've got to support the British workforce. I'm sorry.
Of course. Well, in 2004, the Labour Party threw open the floodgates to people coming from the ex-Soviet countries in Eastern Europe, where wage levels were a small fraction of what they were in Britain. And that was a deliberate act of government policy at the time.
I agree, and it was terrible. And the problem is the Conservatives have been in for 12 years and haven't reversed any of it.
Done nothing.
Thank you very much to Lizzie and Neil. You're with Calvin Robinson, covering for Nana this week on GB News, on your TV and on your digital radio. After the break, it's time for the Great British Debate. This hour, I'm asking, should the UK ban smoking? According to a recent study, half of Britons believe that the legal age of smoking should be raised to 21. But should smoking be outlawed altogether? Smoking costs the NHS approximately £2.4 billion every year, but an outright ban could be problematic. The government could lose £8.8 billion in tax revenue and would infringe upon people's civil liberties, effectively turning the country into a nanny state. Send us an email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Tell us what you think. You can also tweet at GBNews. And there's a poll up right now asking, should the UK ban smoking? Cast your vote now. First, here's the weather.
Well, this evening, largely dry across the country with some rain across the far northwest. Let's home in now on the detail. And a dry picture across the southwest of England throughout this evening with a few sunny spells ahead of sunset. Fairly pleasant, temperatures around 20, light winds as well. Largely dry at 7 o'clock this evening across the southeast of England. Some last glimmers of sunshine ahead of darkness, perhaps an isolated light shower too. Dry across South Wales, patchy cloud in places, winds fairly light and feeling quite warm with temperatures around 22 Celsius. And mostly dry with patchy cloud across the Midlands this evening. Perhaps an isolated shower, but many places avoiding rain. Winds light, temperatures around 22 as well. And the risk of a few light showers this evening across the northeast of England, though most places will stay dry. Some sunshine ahead of nightfall, patchy cloud, temperatures around 20. And a dry end of the day with plenty of sunny spells ahead of dusk. For Scotland, a low chance of the odd sharp shower, but many places avoiding that. Temperatures about 18. Across Northern Ireland, patchy rain and drizzle towards the north and west of the country, staying dry elsewhere. Winds light, temperatures about 18. So, heading into overnight, most places dry, clearer spells this evening, but that patchy rain persisting across the northwest of the UK. And that's how it's shaping up tonight.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
You are with Calvin Robinson, attempting to cover for Nana this week on GB News on TV and on your digital radio. It's time for the great British debate this hour. I'm asking, should the UK ban smoking? According to a recent study conducted by University College London, half of Britons believe that the legal age of smoking should be raised to 21. And a staggering 70% want the government to restrict tobacco sales near schools. I'm not sure how they do that. Currently, around 6 million people in the UK smoke, costing the NHS approximately £2.4 billion every year. Smoking is linked to a number of health problems, including cancer, heart and lung disease, as well as strokes. Outlawing smoking would therefore save lives and keep more money in the taxpayers' pockets. It seems like a no-brainer, but an outright ban could be problematic. It has the potential to encourage people to turn to the black markets. Not to mention the government would lose £8.8 billion in tax revenue, whilst others, including myself, argue a ban would infringe upon people's civil liberties, effectively turning the country into a nanny state. So for the great British debate this hour, I'm asking, should the UK ban smoking? I'm joined by Simon Clark, no, not that one, the director of smokers lobby group Forest. First of all, Simon, thank you so much for joining us. If the UK were to ban smoking, it would save lives. Surely that's the most important thing?
Well, we live in a free society, and you could ban lots of things if you wanted to save lives. You could ban cars on the road, for example, because people die every day in traffic accidents. You could ban the sale of alcohol because some people get addicted to alcohol and become alcoholics and die of that. So we have to decide what type of society we live in. No, I'm not a smoker. I grew up in the 70s when a lot of people at school and university around me, they smoked. It didn't encourage me to smoke. But at the end of the day, you know, once you become 18, you're an adult. And in a free liberal society, a mature society, you have to be allowed to make choices, even if some of those choices might not be good for you. It's your choice, it's not the government's. Now, there's this call to raise the age of sale of tobacco to 21. Now, we agree
so that's a good point, though. Are you an adult at 18 or are you an adult at 21?
Well, I think you're an adult at 18. In the eyes of the law, you're certainly an adult. I mean, the situation at the moment is that you can have sex legally at 16, you can join the army or drive a car at 17, you can buy alcohol at 18. I mean, 15 years ago, they raised the age of sale of tobacco from 16 to 18. And we agreed with that because that seemed perfectly logical to bring tobacco into line with alcohol. But raising the age to 21, suddenly you're infantilizing young adults. Now, you know, between the age of 18 and 21, you may be a young adult, but you're still an adult. And as I say, in a free society, we have to encourage people to make their own choices. Now,
well, indeed, Simon,
two children,
there are some that would say that
in their 20s.
This is nanny statism through the back door. So the age range was put up from 16 to 18. Now they're looking to put it up from 18 to 21. It could be suggested that they're gradually going to increase the age range until it's no longer legal.
Yes, and that has been suggested by Dr. Jared Khan, whose report into this came out a couple of months ago. He suggested raising the age of sale by 1 year every year, so that eventually, as you say, nobody would be allowed to buy tobacco at all. But of course, before that happened, you might have the ludicrous situation where somebody aged 30 could go into a tobacconist and buy tobacco. But if you were 29, you would be prohibited from doing that. And the word prohibition, I think, is quite important because, of course, the anti-smoking campaigners they don't like us talking about the nanny state and they don't like us talking about prohibition. But what we're seeing with tobacco is creeping prohibition. We've seen it repeatedly over the last 15, 20 years, when a whole series of new laws have been introduced designed to force people to give up smoking. Now, as an organisation, Forest does not have any problem with smoking rates coming down. They've been falling for 50 years. Most of the biggest reasons for that has been that people have been educated about the health risks of smoking. They understand the health risks of smoking, and they either don't start smoking in the first place, or millions of people have chosen to give up. But they've chosen, until the last 20 years, they chose to give up of their own accord. It was their decision.
That's the key.
What's happened in the last 20 years? We've seen a sea
choice.
change where the government is trying to bully and coerce people to give up, and that's what we object to.
I'm with you 100% on that one. Simon Clark, director of the Smokies lobby group Forest. Thank you very much. I'm also joined by stop smoking expert Louise Ross. Louise, thank you so much for joining us. Smoking generates a lot of tax revenue, £8.8 billion. That's a significant sum. Can we do without it?
Well, one of the proposals in the Khan review that Simon referred to was to put a levy onto the tobacco industry. So, the tobacco industry has caused the huge toll of death, disability and disease that smoking causes. They should pay for the treatment of smokers, for providing support for people to quit. So a tobacco levy is one of the main propositions in the Khan report, and I would certainly expect to see that supported by Her Majesty's government.
But where does this stop? If we say we're going to ban smoking because it's going to protect people's health, do we then say we're going to ban red meat? Are we going to ban alcohol? Do you not see this as a thin end of the...
Well, I'm curious where you've got the idea that the UK is going to ban smoking, because that was not on the list of recommendations. But many very useful things were. For instance,
but the recommendation was that we keep increasing the age of prohibition. We keep increasing the age of prohibition until it's no longer legal. So it was kind of a sneaky way of banning smoking, wasn't it?
But that isn't government policy. That is one of a list of recommendations by somebody who took a very comprehensive look at all the things that could be done to reach the point where this country has fewer smokers than ever before. Now, an ambition to drive smoking rates down to 5% would be... to achieve that would mean that the health of the population improves, that pregnant women are so much less likely to smoke when they're carrying their babies, young children are less likely to become smokers. That's what the smoke-free ambition is about. It's not about banning
smoking. If we step away from government
intervention
intervention for a moment, what approach would you take to convince people to kick the habit?
Well, most people who smoke wish they'd never started in the first place, and they would like more help to actually stop. Now, we've got an excellent stop smoking service nationally, and not enough people use it. They may have fears about what it might mean, but there are many other ways that people can get help to stop smoking, and one of those is using non-smoked products. So I personally and professionally do a lot to recommend vaping as an alternative to smoking, because you've got the nicotine without the smoke, without the tar, the carbon monoxide, the harmful products of combustion. And I spoke to somebody who used to be a smoker just yesterday, and she said she's done it. She's achieved what she always wanted to achieve, and that is not smoking, because she's used a really good vape, and she uses a patch. Well, and her husband, who was also a smoker, was so impressed that I'm
glad she managed to do that
as well.
Off of her own back with her own personal choice.
Many. Sorry, go on, Calvin.
Louise Ross, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure. Louise Ross, stop smoking expert. You're with Calvin Robinson today, covering for Nana all week on GB News, on your TV and on your digital radio. After the break, we'll continue the great British debate. I'm asking, should the UK ban smoking? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, leader of the UK Independence Party, Neil Hamilton, and broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. First is the latest news headlines. Here's Tatiana.
Thanks, Calvin. Good afternoon. It's 4:33. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The Chancellor has warned middle-income earners could struggle to pay their energy bills this winter, saying he's concerned about those who aren't on benefits. Speaking to the Daily Telegraph, Nadeem Zahawi said people earning around £45,000 a year may need government support. It's after Ofgem announced an 80% hike in the energy price cap to over £3,500 from October. Police investigating the murder of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool say silence is not an option. They're appealing for more help from the public after releasing video of a man being arrested on suspicion of murder on Thursday. A second man who was arrested yesterday is also being questioned. The Met Police will be investigated following the death of a man in Kingston in southwest London last night. Officers were trying to arrest him following an allegation of theft when he entered the River Thames. His body was recovered 2 hours later. Police say he wasn't in handcuffs. The incident has been referred to the Independent Office for Police Conduct. And a car once owned by Princess Diana has sold at auction for £650,000. The black Ford Escort RS Turbo, which was driven by the royal between 1985 and 1988, was initially expected to fetch around £100,000. Silverstone Auctions says the RS Turbo Series 1 was usually made in white, but the royal family police guard asked for Diana's to be painted black for reasons of discretion. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Calvin.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're with Calvin Robinson covering for Nana this week on GB News, on your TV and on your digital radio. Let's get back to the great British debate. This hour I'm asking, should the UK ban smoking? According to a recent study, half of Britons believe that the legal age of smoking should be raised to 21. Currently around 6 million people in the UK smoke, costing the NHS approximately £2.4 billion every year. Outlawing smoking would therefore save lives and keep money in the taxpayer's pocket. It seems like a no-brainer, but an outright ban could be problematic. It has the potential to encourage people to turn to the black market, and not to mention the government would lose £8.8 billion in tax revenue, whilst others, including myself, would argue a ban would infringe upon their civil liberties, effectively turning the country into a nanny state. So for the great British debate this hour, I'm asking, should the UK ban smoking? Before I bring in my panel, let's have a quick look at what you guys have been saying. Mary says, this is a terrible idea. The UK would become a nanny state. Where would you draw the line? Life is hard enough already. Fair enough, people want their simple pleasures. Paul says, I don't smoke, but I think it's a bad idea. I also believe we should allow indoor smoking again in pubs and other places at the owner's discretion, therefore taking the choice from the person to the venue. Interesting take. Christine says, smoking is so bad for you. I don't understand why anyone would pick up a cigarette these days, knowing the consequences. I say it's time to ban them. Sure, but people know it's bad for them, but they choose to smoke. That's up to them, right? Individual choice. Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by the leader of the UK Independence Party, Neil Hamilton, and broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. Now, do either of you smoke?
I don't smoke, but I've been known to have the occasional one after a few drinks, which is very naughty, and I always regret it the next day.
Your friends are a bad influence on you?
They're bad. I'm blaming my friends, yes. They're like, go and have a puff. But I am against smoking. Right. And sadly, I lost my father early because he was a smoker. I remember the days on a plane when you could smoke. I remember as a little girl as being in the... You know, it was unbelievable. I don't know if you remember that, Neil. You're not old enough.
I remember the days almost before aeroplanes at all.
But it is an awful, filthy, addictive habit, and not only cancer does it bring on strokes, heart disease, but as you say, I don't believe, I hate banning anything, and I think the way we can help people not smoke is just through education, parental, care, telling them that how wrong it is to smoke. But sadly, I don't think we can be told, and as you said, it will just go underground and on the black market. And how do you police it anyway? Let's be honest. And you're only going to get their older friends to go and buy them. I know people are saying they want to follow the footsteps of New Zealand, but how do you police it? I mean, and the police at the minute have got enough on their plate, unless they're not doing
pronouns, aren't they?
Yes, and doing the
Lawrence Fox's tweets. That's what they're busy doing.
They're dancing, doing the Macarena and painting rainbows on their police cars. So how do you police this? And I don't understand why we'd want this, though I totally, don't like smoking. And
there's always a way around it as well. I just got back from Greece, and in the airport, you can only buy a certain amount of cigarettes on one boarding pass. So all the guy did until next to me is grab the boarding pass of the person behind him and use that to buy another packet of cigarettes. There's always a way around these things.
Yeah.
Neil, what do you think?
Yeah, I expect we'll get small boats coming across the channel loaded with cigarettes if we banned them. But
because there's nothing stopping people coming over the channel. So.
And the government would be as useless at controlling the imported cigarettes that way, no doubt, as they are of the imported people. But no, I'm against all this health fascism, and I've never smoked cigarettes. I have had the odd cigar, more for effect than for inhalation. but nevertheless, I believe it's the right of everybody to go to hell in their own way. And we know that there are risks associated with cigarette smoke, same as... the biggest cause of death in this country is related to obesity. So this is a thin end of the wedge, as you said. Yes, should we ban sweets? Should we ban crisps? Should we ban burgers and fast food?
Alcohol?
Processed foods, alcohol?
People would like to.
I mean, there are
people like Jamie Oliver would like
professional killjoys who think that we should, adopt the kind of North Korean approach to things. Indeed, we've just spent 2 years living in a pale version of North Korea at the command of the government. So I think that we should actually roll back the state and restore people's freedoms and certainly not diminish them any further.
Well, to flip it round on its head, Lizzie, the government has tried everything. They've got those horrible, disgusting images on fag packets and all of that. It's not worked, or it's worked to some degree, but people are still smoking. If they really want to encourage people to stop smoking, what do you think they should be doing?
Well, there should be more education on it through schools, that's what I think. And I think parents have a responsibility. But those that I know that do want this ban, they say that at your frontal cortex, that's your decision-making, thinking doesn't actually develop properly until you're 25 years old. So there's a point there. That's what they're saying. At 21, are you making the best decisions and thinking properly? But I really do think it's about education and being properly told the damage smoking can do to you.
Well, there's a social aspect to it as well, isn't there?
Of course.
Would that mean that cigar clubs are going to be banned? Would that mean that
exactly.
No longer...
And I agree with Simon Clarke when he said that it's a matter of free choice for people. I don't think that we should compel people to have a particular lifestyle, which we might find preferable, but they don't. This is what it ultimately comes from. I'm very disappointed that, according to that poll, 70% of people think that we should introduce this ban.
But there is
Because
a case for with when you're smoking and you're putting it onto other people that are non-smokers, and it is really awful if you're sitting there eating outside. Recently, and then someone lights up a cigarette without asking. I think you've got to have manners and do it the right way.
But
if you are
also,
going to smoke outside,
the way that
do it in
everyone
your
smokes
backyard.
outside now, when you go to a pub or you go to a restaurant, you have to walk through the cloud of smoke now. So actually, you're inhaling a load of smoke on entry and on exit.
Well, that's
It's not pleasant, but there has to be a way around it. And it is a lifestyle choice, isn't it? But people should have the right to make a bad lifestyle choice if they want to.
Exactly.
It's your decision, and that's what we like about this country, isn't it? We have freedom of choice. But I have to say, I wouldn't have met Simon Cowell if I didn't go out for that sneaky
that's the story
cigarette.
I want to know.
There you go. I went outside for a sneaky cigarette, and that's how we became friends.
Really?
Yeah.
Smoking, yes. Gave me one of his menthols, but there you go. So it is a social aspect. I understand what you're saying, Kelvin, but I think there needs to be more education in the damage it does.
Yeah,
That's another argument for moving away from working from home and back to the office, isn't it? You know, the water cooler conversation, the fag break outside, those conversations. You wouldn't have made that connection with Simon Cowell, for goodness sake, if you weren't having a fag break.
Exactly.
Like, this is the thing that people are missing out on by not wanting to get back to the office.
And people don't talk about the health impacts of the lockdown in the way that they should do. I think, of course, we are seeing these excess death figures coming out now, something which the government doesn't refer to, of course, yet, but they will do. They'll have to recognise it eventually. Ultimately, events do have consequences, and we should be adult enough to recognise that.
But people are very stressed at the minute with the high cost of living and everything else.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, cigarettes are very expensive, but sometimes you just need to have a bit of a de-stressor, like a cigarette or a glass of wine.
On that note, do you think more people took up smoking over lockdown?
Well, that's perfectly possible, isn't it? And it's like everything. Do it in excess, it's bound to do you some harm, or virtually bound to. But moderate smoking, I can't really see an argument against, even though I don't do it myself.
Well, I can see the argument against it. You know, both of my grandfathers died from lung cancer from smoking, but at the same time, I respect their choice, and they chose to do it knowing the risks, and they enjoyed it. And life is so short. If we can't do the things we enjoy, what is the point?
Otherwise, you'd ban mountain climbing, skydiving, all sorts of dangerous things that people do because they like to have the thrill, but they know the risks that are associated.
But you see, the non-smokers don't want it put on themselves. That's where the smokers have to be considerate and polite.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's all about toleration and respect for other people, in my opinion, which is what British society at one time was all about.
Back to British values, I love it. Well, this show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome one of our great British voices. This is your opportunity to be on the show and tell us what you think about what we're discussing. This hour, we're heading over to Bristol to speak to our GB viewer, Lee Harris. Lee, welcome, mate. Are you a smoker?
I used to be a long time ago. I was quite a heavy smoker, actually. But I agree with much of what you've said already, to be honest. We wanted to start a family, so we made a lifestyle. The change in lifestyle was part of that decision. So about 7 years ago, me and my wife decided to quit smoking. And we both vaped initially. I still vape now, but my wife doesn't vape at all. But the short answer is no. I agree with you. I believe in freedom of choice. I'm a conservative. I don't want the government to infringe on our civil liberties any more than they have already in the last couple of years. I want less of a nanny state. So no, I don't think we should ban smoking. But yeah, I switched to vaping, and honestly, without vaping, I wouldn't have been able to quit. So I do encourage people that.
Lee, I don't see it as the same. I see, smoking's got a certain je ne sais quoi about it. These vapes are it's like sucking on a dummy. Do you get the same effect from
it? To me, it was a real habitual thing. Yes, I was addicted to the nicotine. I think everyone is, but it was also the habit of physically smoking. So I needed to find a vape that replicated not just the act of putting the cigarette to my mouth, but actually even the strength of the puff that you get and everything. I had to try and replicate it. And as soon as I replicated that, I was on my vape for about 2 weeks. Right. And after that 2 weeks, I wanted my vape and I didn't want the cigarettes, and that was it. I never turned back. And I haven't puffed a cigarette for 7 years. And I wish a lot more people would vape, or at least temporarily go on to vaping before they start smoking. But, one thing that hasn't been said yet is I actually do think that we are going in the right direction anyway. I see smoking as almost like a generational thing. Anecdotally, I'm sure you'd agree that a lot of young children or younger kids don't smoke as much as they used to. I certainly don't see it as much myself anymore, certainly not as it was in the late 90s. I mean, in the late 90s, pretty much all kids smoked. Certainly that's how it felt back then. And attitudes have massively changed.
I think you're absolutely spot on.
So we're going in the right direction.
Yeah, so let's let it happen naturally. That's Lee Harris. Thank you very much for being our GB voice. Lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. We've got an email from Mark who said, smoking is absolutely disgusting and I can't stand being anywhere near it, but the government shouldn't interfere in people's lives. Adults have a right to choose what they put in their body. Thank you, bodily autonomy. Dave says, this is a tough question. Smoking is revolting, but I do not usually support banning things. I believe nothing positive comes from smoking, so in this case, I would have to outlaw it. It seems a little bit contradictory there, Dave. I'm not sure you know where you stand on that one. Lorraine says, I personally think smoking is a nasty habit, but if someone wants to inhale toxic waste into their lungs, then it's their decision. They will have to deal with the consequences of their actions. Here. Keith says the government would lose billions of pounds in tax. I don't think a ban would work in this country. I'm not sure the tax argument is one we should be going with, but I hear what you're saying. Patrick, I gave up smoking 10 years ago and I have no regrets, but it was my choice to both smoke and to give up. If you normalise a nanny state, what is next? Alcohol, sugar, carbs. People should resist government overreach. Absolutely they should. If we've learned anything over the last couple of years, is the government will overreach as much as we let them. Kevin says, it's none of our business if somebody else wants to smoke, as long as they do it in a smoking area. We should leave them in peace. It's nothing to do with anyone, it's a personal choice. There's also a poll up on Twitter today throughout the show asking, should the UK ban smoking? Currently 28% say yes and 72% say no. And with the majority on this one. You are with Calvin Robinson covering for Nana this week on GB News and TV and on digital radio. After the break, it's the Royal Roundup. Royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams will join me to discuss the launch of Meghan Markle's new podcast. We will also be discussing Prince Harry taking a private jet to a one-day polo match. First, it's a short break.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
You're with Calvin Robinson covering for Nana this week on GB News on TV and on digital radio. There's always something going on in the royal household, and this week has been no different. Each Saturday we give you a rundown of what's been going on, and today I'm joined by royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams. Richard, always a pleasure to see you. let's start with the podcast, this blooming podcast. Because I saw the advert. Meghan managed to get me, and myself in there like 3 times in a 30-second clip. So I'm guessing it was quite a bit about her.
There was a tremendous amount about her. I have to say, first, it's her second podcast. It's one of a series. The first podcast for Spotify was, in fact, very dreary and made no impression at all.
When was this one?
It was last year.
Oh, okay.
This most certainly has. And to give it its due, it is a #1.
Yeah.
Rogan, forget it.
How has she trumped Joe Rogan?
Yes, she has, and that is the report in all the papers, because, of course, Serena Williams was the guest, and Serena is fantastic on and off the court. She's terrific fun. Now, you mentioned Meghan's me. There is an awful lot of that. Now, playing the critic on the one hand, yes, far, far too much about her. Also, it's about women and ambition and the fact that it's considered...
She's a very ambitious woman, I'll give her that.
Oh, she certainly is, but it's considered bad in women. But on the other hand, it's fine in men, and that, of course, is utterly hypocritical. What Meghan doesn't do, and it would have added a lot of weight to it, is to give the Me Too movement credit for having broken the glass ceiling years and years ago. Of course, there's a great way to go, but equally there's not a single mention of that.
Richard, did she give anyone credits?
Well, she interviews Serena, will say that, and will also say that there was a very controversial story. Serena was talking about the problems of going out in public, playing a match when you've had a family scare. The fire in South Africa, where Harry and Meghan were on an official visit, and Archie was in this room with his nanny. She luckily had left the room and gone downstairs for a snack and taken Archie with her, but it must have been horrible to come back to find there had been a fire in that room. Equally, Meghan was implying that it was extremely difficult, i.e. possibly they shouldn't have been asked to do it, to go on another engagement. My own feeling is that it's very difficult. Fortunately, there'd been not only no injury, but Archie hadn't actually been there when the fire had occurred. So it's par for the course. It depends.
Twitter comes above other
Twitter,
things.
well, absolutely, but I mean, they were going to District 6, which had been the scene in the 1960s of abominable forced removals by the apartheid regime. So it had a very, very strong emotional connotation. So, of course, I believe they should have gone. But equally, you'll find on Twitter fierce views both ways, and
I mean, it's fair enough, because as a mother, surely if something's going on, even if Archie wasn't in the room, that instinct is going to kick in.
No, absolutely, and that's what she was talking about. But expect Mariah Carey in another week, and yes, it will be interesting. So she's got a series lined up, but at least she's doing something which she wasn't before.
I mean, she got paid £18 million for this podcast series, right?
Well, reportedly, for Netflix and Spotify, they've earned a small fortune. And the reason they can do that as well, is because they're royal.
Because she's cashing in on the royal title,
absolutely. Well, of course. And were they to do so, and were they to be constructive and not criticise the royal family, and in fact, hopefully, we've heard Harry's memoir may be postponed. There's no publication date for it. Right. That would make sense.
So let's talk about him, because he has been a hypocrite this week too, hasn't he?
Oh, there's no doubt at all. I mean, he said that he only wanted 2 children because it's a problem of saving the planet because of climate change.
Which is dreadful. We should all have as many children as possible, in my opinion.
Well, whatever your view, the facts are, he played polo for Centre Bali, which is his HIV charity in Lesotho. But did he take a commercial airline? He did not.
Surely he
took
did.
A private jet.
Okay, so I would have assumed he was looking after his carbon footprint and going by public transportation, but no, he took a private jet all the way there
Which
for a one-day event.
Apparently. That's hypocrisy.
Yes. So this autobiography, or this biography of his, is going to be delayed, is it?
Apparently, we have no date, so it appears to be delayed. I sincerely hope so, because what he could say in it would and could cause a lot of controversy.
Could they ban him from releasing it?
No way, I don't think anyone's talking about banning him from releasing it. What could conceivably be going on behind the scenes, which we don't know, is a great deal of pressure. For example, what would he say about the period that, he and William, how did they respond to Camilla during the rehabilitation period after Diana's death, this sort of thing. And remember, of course, we're approaching the 25th anniversary of that, and a tragedy, obviously something he was referring to in a speech after the polo event and paying tribute to his mother, who was truly remarkable, absolutely unique, glamorous, amazing, also in some ways manipulative, but no question her legacy is absolutely astounding. And of course we've got, as you know, a new Prime Minister soon.
Right, so Richard, tell me about the new protocol with the new Prime Minister and Her Majesty the Queen.
This time, it would seem, according to the reports, the Queen had hoped to come down, based at Windsor, possibly at Buckingham Palace, where, of course, the so-called kissing hands ceremony, where she receives the new Prime Minister, an audience usually occurs. The reports are now that because of the Queen's mobility issues, the new Prime Minister will be journeying to Balmoral, which is where Boris Johnson will be going when he bows out.
So it is down to her accessibility, it is down to making things easier for Her Majesty the Queen.
Absolutely, though this isn't official yet, of course. We don't definitely know, but these are the reports.
It's quite noble that she's actually still working, isn't it? It's fantastic.
Oh, it's an example to us all. She was a role model for everyone of an advanced age.
Isn't that the whole point of the royal family?
Well, a national unity and also the power they had, not only the power they have, but the power they deny to others, and head of nation, head of state, unique in the world.
And an example of service and duty and obligation to each other and to the nation.
She has been absolutely brilliant, but what's fascinating is that in an age, for example, where you communicate virtually, who does it better? I mean, they always used to call the Queen one-take Windsor because of her brilliance at Christmas broadcasts, but now, when so many are doing it, and it's the way, of course, we've done so during the pandemic, the Queen excels at it.
She's an absolute star. I wish I could read an autocue half as good as she can, bless her. God rest her soul. Now, you are watching GB News with Calvin Robinson covering for Nana Akua. More to come in the next hour. You are with Calvin Robinson covering for Nana this week on GB News, on your TV and on digital radio. For the next hour, me and my panel will be discussing some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. But first of all, let's take a look at the latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. It is 5 o'clock. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The Chancellor has acknowledged middle-income earners and the most vulnerable face hardship over the coming months. Nadeem Zahawi says he's concerned about people who aren't on benefits, telling the Daily Telegraph those earning around £45,000 a year may also need government support. It's after Ofgem announced an 80% hike in the energy price cap. The cost of living crisis will be a priority for the next Prime Minister. Conservative MP Robert Halfon told GB News Rishi Sunak has a proven track record of helping the country.
I do believe that his track record shows that when it counts, he does help with the cost of living. The government spent £37 billion. It's a huge amount of money, especially with the current spending pressures, to try and help people over the next few months. He acted properly when times were tough. If we didn't have the furlough scheme, my constituents would have become destitute. Our businesses would have closed.
Police investigating the murder of Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool say silence is not an option. The 9-year-old was killed by a gunman in her home on Monday night. Police are appealing for more help from the public after 2 people were arrested on suspicion of murder. Speaking to GB News, local residents said Olivia's death will have a huge impact on her classmates.
My sister works in the school that Olivia goes to. And I think it's going to have a massive impact on the other children.
So when the kids go back to school, there's going to be that empty space where Olivia's at, and then kids won't be able to cope because that was their plan. Their plan got taken away too soon.
The Met Police will be investigated following the death of a man in Kingston in southwest London. Officers were in the process of making an arrest following an allegation of theft when he entered the River Thames last night. His body was recovered 2 hours later. Police say he wasn't in handcuffs. The incident has been referred to the Independent Office for Police Conduct. 3 years after he was killed in a crash, the family of Harry Dunn say they miss him terribly. A memorial rite has been staged at the US Embassy in London to mark the anniversary of his death. The 19-year-old was killed when his motorbike collided with a car which was allegedly being driven on the wrong side of the road. American Anne Sekulis was charged with causing death by dangerous driving, but was allowed to leave the country because she had diplomatic immunity. His friend Zach Veldkamp says the fight for justice continues.
It's almost gone from the initial sadness to being pulled along and strung and continuously pulled out, so the sadness continues, and it's almost like when is it going to happen? Moving forward, I think there will be more protests. We will continue, we won't go silently, and we won't let it be swept away.
The government has announced a £56 billion plan to crack down on sewage spills. Under the proposals, water companies in the UK will face tough targets to minimise pollution. It's after dozens of warnings were issued for beaches and swimming spots across England and Wales last week, following heavy rain that overwhelmed sewage systems. Campaigner Fergal Sharkey has criticised the way the government's handled the problem.
Over the last 2 years, we now know water companies have spent almost 6 million hours on over 775,000 separate occasions dumping sewage into the environment. I'm afraid government's response to this is, quite frankly, a shambles. It is, in my personal opinion, probably the greatest act of violence I'll see committed against the environment, certainly in my lifetime.
And a car once owned by Princess Diana has sold at auction for £650,000. The black Ford Escort RS Turbo, which was driven by the Royal between 1985 and 1988, was initially expected to fetch around £100,000. Silverstone Auction says the RS Turbo Series 1 was usually made in white, but the Royal Family Police Guard asked for Diana's to be painted in black for reasons of discretion. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Calvin.
Thank you, Tatiana. I'm loving that you coordinated outfits with me today. This is GB News. I'm Calvin Robinson, covering for Nana this week. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times disagreeing. Joining me today is leader of the UK Independence Party, Neil Hamilton, and broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. Still to come, in just a moment it's difficult conversations, and today we're discussing discipline in British schools. Ofsted has rated a school inadequate after being deemed too strict. Parents claim the secondary has become an army camp where children are terrified. So it begs the question, how strict is too strict? And in a great British debate this hour, I'm asking, what should the government do to help you with your energy bills? Yesterday's Ofgem announcement of the new energy price cap revealed that there will be an 80% rise in average household energy bills. Tory leadership hopefuls Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak have outlined their plans to help households tackle this crisis, but is what they are offering going to be enough? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. This year, the government has attempted to tackle grade inflation brought on by the pandemic. GCSE grades were down from last year's record high numbers, but still remained above pre-COVID levels. Those receiving top grades dropped by 3 percentage points from last year. That's as students who made the pass mark also fell by 4 points. During lockdown, some would argue youngsters lacked a form of discipline when working from home. But now teachers are able to keep a watchful eye over their pupils after returning to the classroom. One school in Kent has been dubbed the strictest in the UK, with parents describing the institution as an army camp, with children terrified to go in. following changes implemented by an education advisor at the Abbey School. Ofsted rated it inadequate. This all begs the question, just how strict is too strict before the learning environment becomes toxic? Joining me now, live to discuss this, is founder and headmistress of the Great Michaela Community School, Catherine Burblesing, and education consultant, the wonderful Barry Smith. Thank you both for joining me. It's an honour to be on with both of you. What the viewers won't know is that I learned pretty much everything I know about education from you, Per, and your colleagues. So thank you for that. Let's start off, I think. Let's start with Barry and address this situation. What has gone on? Why has the school been marked as inadequate? Is it because Ofsted do not appreciate what discipline means in school?
I go to lots of schools all over the country, and I've got a lot of schools that have been categorised as good or even outstanding. My estimation of good and outstanding when it comes to discipline is often very different from Ofsted's. I think generally their standards in terms of what good discipline is, what good relationships within a school are, I think they've got very low standards.
And is this across the board, do you think, Catherine? Are low standards across the state sector and the private sector in education?
Yeah, I think that people imagine that corridors in schools are filled with children skipping down, skipping along, chatting about Aristotle and enjoying life, when actually the reality is that kids are getting beaten up, they're getting pushed and shoved and bullied, lots of screaming and shouting and running. And the question is that what we want our schools to be like? Do we want that kind of chaos? Because it's not just that happens in the corridors and that children are actually unsafe, but then when they get into their lessons, they're so high from the nonsense in the corridors that it can take, in some places, 10, 15 minutes to calm the children down to be able to get on with their learning. And when you're trying to catch children up with their chronological reading age, there are some children who might start secondary school with the reading age of a 5 or a 6-year-old when they are in fact 11 years old. You need as much time in the classroom as possible. And if they're wasting their time misbehaving and making the children unsafe and that they themselves are unsafe, this should be something that we're all worried about. But weirdly, we're not worried about that. And we're not learning from the schools that are doing their very best at trying to improve that behavior for the sake of the children.
Right. So, I mean, all this is common sense to me, and I'm assuming most of our viewers will share this, that in order to learn, you need to have good behaviour. You can't have one without the other. So who is taking offence at discipline in schools? Barry, why are schools being punished for having good discipline?
Look, it's easy, isn't it? When you try and implement change in a school, you're going to ruffle some feathers. You're going to annoy some people. Some people won't like what you're doing. So you'll always get some irate parent. Instead of following the normal procedures, complaint procedure, a lot of parents will go directly to a governor, or a lot of parents will go directly to Ofsted, or a lot of parents will go directly to the press. There are parents that want their 15 minutes of fame. Good head teachers, they hold their ground. They say, no, this is what I want. These are the values of the school. This is what we're going to stick with. We can't allow the most difficult parents to dictate the culture of the school. It's not fair on staff, and it's not fair on the pupil body as a whole.
So I'm hearing that the teachers have to buy in, because obviously change is never a good thing. Ofsted inspectors have to buy in because they have to appreciate that good discipline means good learning. And also parents have to buy in, because if parents don't see this as a benefit for their child, they're going to complain, as has been the case here, over things such as children should be silent in assemblies, children should cross their arms and track a teacher and pay attention. I can't see how these are problems, but it is a case of buy-in, isn't it? Catherine, have you found that your outcomes have won people over?
Yeah. So the outcomes can definitely win parents over, but any new head in a school where they're trying to turn it around doesn't have those outcomes. And so it can be very hard when it'll be a small number of parents, mind you. Most parents will be very grateful for what's happening, and they'll be thrilled that finally their child is able to learn. Unfortunately, they're often the quietest parents. It's the loudest parents who can give a lot of trouble. But I'd say the thing that heads fear most of all is Ofsted. The thing that will prevent a head from really giving children what they need, which is a loving environment that holds standards high for them and looks after them so that they're not getting beaten up in the corridors, the thing that'll stop a head from implementing those systems is their fear of Ofsted. And what worries me with this particular situation is that Ofsted has sort of let us down, really. And I have to say that that sort of thing used to happen over a decade ago with Ofsted inspectors. It was quite common. That I thought had stopped happening. So when I read about this particular story, I was very worried because I thought, oh my goodness, is it the case that Ofsted has gone back to its old ways? Because that makes things very, very hard for head teachers and very hard for those of us trying to persuade other leaders in education that good discipline is a good thing to have in schools.
Absolutely, because I looked at the Ofsted inspection and I saw it said the school were quick on interventions, there was mass compliance from pupils, the school was plugging the gap left behind by COVID and lockdowns, and there was a strong uptake in modern foreign languages, no doubt in part due to Barry's influence there. So all of these seem good. It seems to me that the suggestion where the school fell apart in their eyes is this lack of compassion. How do we, Barry, convince people that work hard to be kind or have a warm, strict environment is a case of loving students? It's not about being horrible. It's not about being authoritarian. It's about doing what's best for them.
We stick to our guns. We stick to our guns. We protect staff. We protect kids, and we do not back down. And that's what I love about what Catherine does and what they will do with Michaela there. You can be attacked and attacked and attacked, and you will be attacked if you are going against the zeitgeist. But you mustn't back down. And in the fullness of time, as Catherine just said, the vast majority of parents will see, my God, my kids are learning more, they're happier. The way they interact with adults changes within school, but also outside of school. They become more relaxed, more confident young people. And that's the nature of the job. You look at a school like Catherine's, and they're very, very few and far between. In fact, I'd say Michaela's unique. Great results, but it isn't just about the great results. It's about the young adults these kids become, and it's thanks to an amazingly strong school culture. And we have to keep pushing for that. We mustn't back down. We mustn't be fearful of Ofsted. In fact, we must, put our hand up and say, "Oh, Ofsted have got it wrong," and they get it wrong repeatedly, I would say.
And it's wider than just Ofsted, isn't it? This is an institutional problem within education. This idea that the child should be the centre of their learning, and we're here saying, but they don't know what they don't know. Catherine, can you give us an argument for a knowledge-rich curriculum, for memorising facts and dates, for installing a canon knowledge to young people?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when you just said that, you see, it sounds so seductive, having the child at the centre of their learning. Well, why wouldn't you want that? And what your viewers need to understand is that what that means is it's code for the child is leading as opposed to the adult in the room leading. And the child is depending on the parent or on the teacher to do the leading, because we know more than the children. We have degrees, we have many years experience. So we're the ones that need to show them the way. And you hold their hand and you help them. You don't say to a child who's 4 or 5 years old, well, you cross the street on your own. You hold his hand and you do it over and over again until eventually he learns how to do it on his own, and then you let him go and do it on his own. Anything requires scaffolding until the child is at a point where you can say, off you go, little birdie, fly. And unfortunately, nowadays, there are too many people who don't understand that. And when you talk about a knowledge-rich curriculum, what you mean is that we have lots of knowledge in our heads and that we're going to put all that knowledge into the heads of the children. And unfortunately, I'd say over the last 30, 40 years, a trend has come along which suggests that the knowledge is already in the child and that it's for us as adults to draw it out of the child. But I always say that if you feel like you're drawing it out and you're being successful, that knowledge was put into that child by somebody else other than you. If you didn't put it there, then somebody else did. And what that then does is it divides the children who come from homes where they're getting lots of knowledge being put in. So they go into the lesson and it looks like the teacher's drawing it out of them. And well, they are, because the children have already been taught it at home. And it divides them from the children who don't get that from their homes. And if they don't have that at home, the only place they can access knowledge is at school. But they're going to school and then being faced with this idea that, oh, but I'm already meant to have the knowledge in my head, and they don't have it there. So all of these modern methods are actually failing the poor, failing children who come from more challenging circumstances. And it's the same with the discipline. if there isn't discipline for all of the children who end up falling off the bandwagon are the ones who are the most vulnerable, the ones who need it the most. And that's no way for us to go about trying to achieve social mobility in the country, because it's the poorest, it's the most disadvantaged who pay the price.
I agree. And I'm going to give a challenging question to Barry here, because you've probably been in more schools than I have, but in the schools that I've been in where I've seen this work, they do all of this. The behaviour management is spot on. Tom Bennett's the Behaviour SARS report, all of those things are taken on board. The schools that cherry pick, or the schools that take a few of these things, or maybe listen to a few things that someone like you has said to them, don't get it right. You can't pick and choose these things. Is that the case, do you think? Do you have to be all on?
Yeah, I think it has to be all, or you're going to fail, really, because it's values-based, isn't it? Often I talk about slant and shape and steps. It's 15 behaviours. They're just indicators that children are working with you or against you. Some schools say, oh, do we have to do that? Do we have to fold our arms? Do we have to speak in full sentences? Do we have to make eye contact? Yeah, because these are basic social niceties. And once you give a little bit on basics like that, just courtesy, the basic premise I work on, I always say, children, you're going to be as polite to us as we are to you. And teachers, we need to explicitly model to kids, this is what courtesy looks like. If you're not prepared to be explicit and sweat the small stuff, then you will fail.
Absolutely spot on. Thank you, both of you. Catherine Burblesing, founder and headmistress of Michaela Community School, and Barry Smith, education consultant. And they are both the UK's strictest head teachers, apparently. God bless you. Thank you. Coming up is the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, what should the government do to help you with your energy bills? Yesterday, Ofgem's announcement of the new energy price cap revealed that there will be an 80% rise in average household energy bills. Tory leadership hopefuls Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak have outlined their plans to help households tackle the crisis. But is what they are offering going to be enough? First, here's the weather.
Well, this evening, largely dry across the country with some rain across the far northwest. Let's home in now on the detail. And a dry picture across the southwest of England throughout this evening with a few sunny spells ahead of sunset. Fairly pleasant, temperatures around 20, light winds as well. Largely dry at 7 o'clock this evening across the southeast of England. Some last glimmers of sunshine ahead of darkness, perhaps an isolated light shower too. Dry across South Wales, patchy cloud in places, winds fairly light and feeling quite warm with temperatures around 22 Celsius. And mostly dry with patchy cloud across the Midlands this evening. Perhaps an isolated shower, but many places avoiding rain. Winds light, temperatures around 22 as well. And the risk of a few light showers this evening across the northeast of England, though most places will stay dry. Some sunshine ahead of nightfall, patchy cloud, temperatures around 20. And a dry end of the day with plenty of sunny spells ahead of dusk for Scotland. A low chance of the odd sharp shower, but many places avoiding that. Temperatures about 18. Across Northern Ireland, patchy rain and drizzle towards the north and west of the country, staying dry elsewhere. Winds light, temperatures about 18. So heading into overnight, most places dry, clearer spells this evening, but that patchy rain persisting across the northwest of the UK. And that's how it's shaping up tonight.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
You are with Calvin Robinson covering for Nana this week on GB News, on TV and on digital radio. It's time for our great British debate. This hour I'm asking, what should the government do to help you with your energy bills? Yesterday, Ofgem's announcement of the new energy price cap revealed that there will be an 80% rise in average household energy bills. So far, the government has announced a £400 annual rebate on every household energy bill, and there is an additional £650 of support available for those on qualifying benefits. Tory leadership hopefuls Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak have outlined their plans to help households tackle this crisis, but is what they are offering going to be enough? In the great British debate this hour, I'm asking, what should the government do to help you with your energy bills? I want to hear your thoughts on how you think we should fix this energy crisis. Get in touch by emailing gbviews at gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. I'm joined by Chief Operating Officer and Energy Analyst at the Institute of Economic Affairs, Andy Meyer. Andy, thank you for having the longest title on the show so far. What are Liz and Rishi proposing?
In brief, Rishi is proposing more welfare to tackle the crisis in the immediate instance, and Liz is proposing more tax cuts. But in reality, we don't actually know what either of them would do if they were to win the contest, because it's such a fast-changing environment. And it's very clear that they're holding back with a few things in order to get the most impact from what they're going to say in a couple of weeks' time. But we would imagine that it's a combination of the two. So you need targeted welfare in order to help the most vulnerable households. And for example, you would expect to see that on the warm home discounts or through universal credit or through Rishi's special scheme, although that's been knocked a bit as he's had to change it already. You'd see it through the removal of VAT from energy bills. I think Rishi has proposed that. Liz would probably do that as well. You'd see it through knocking things down like fuel duty. So that's going to help people who are driving, the working poor. So you could see, if they followed the IEA's advice, say 44p off fuel duty and the VAT that's put additionally on fuel duty would have a transformative impact on the cost of filling up at the pump. And you could see it in other things as well. So there are different proposals coming from the opposition. The opposition is saying, well, we just need to freeze all the prices and worry about paying for it at a later date, which is putting everything on taxes. And then the more sensible left wing, the Resolution Foundation, which say actually need a bit of both. So you could do a little bit of price reduction and you could do something to help people with direct and targeted welfare. But to put this in context, if the worst forecasts that are coming out from the analysts for 2023 are correct, that's another 80% or more on top of what's already happened in the last week for October. Then the government's got to do something, because the average amount of money people will be spending on their energy will be going up from what is typically about 3 to 7% up to about 20%. And for the poorest households, that would be about 40%. So enormous sums of money. And that's before we get to the cascade effect of inflation on all the other things that matter, like food, housing, transport, etc.
Absolutely. It's just not realistic, is it? But is what we're seeing right now, these proposals, are they realistic, or is this just a case of pandering to their vote base? Because it seems to me that what Liz Truss is suggesting is a very sound Conservative policy, cutting taxes. But will that work in practice? Because a lot of people that are going to be hit by these rises in prices are actually people that won't be benefiting from a cut in prices or taxes rather.
Yes. So it depends on the taxes, clearly. And if you cut the green levies from bills, then everybody benefits to the same amount because there are a fixed sum that are on the bills. If you cut the tax rises that Rishi Sunak wanted to bring in, that principally helps wealthier households. So you need a combination of both. You need the targeted welfare support that would then actually relieve the immediate impact on families that clearly can't afford these higher bills. So both matter.
So is there something that can be done on the other end of this argument? Could there be a renewal of price caps? Why are the caps getting lifted continuously? Can we not maintain them for a longer period of time?
Well, price caps are an alluring illusion. It's really fantasy economics at play. And there's a number of problems with price caps. So the first problem is they just don't work. This isn't really a price cap. This is a delay in the rise in prices by capping what the energy companies can charge at a particular point until these 3 monthly intervals. So it's not really a price cap. The Labour proposals say that the current price cap should be frozen. Absolutely, that would be a cap. But you're still paying the cost of energy. You're just paying it later. So it's future taxpayers. And the big problem with that is, if we remember Sam Laidlaw, the former boss of Centrica, one of the big energy companies, he was done over in 2013 because he was running 2 swimming pools. So what the Labour proposal is saying is that future taxpayers, your kids and your grandkids, should be paying for Sam to run his swimming pools today, rather than take that price signal that's coming from high energy prices and get rid of some of these flippant uses of energy. Because what will happen is, with prices this high, you will see for every 100% increase in the price of energy, about 20% less energy being used as people stop doing things like that.
Well, Andy,
you need that effect.
We've discussed what the potential next leader could be doing. What's happening right now? Is that enough?
But what's happening right now is probably enough for this winter, but it collapses very quickly in January. We get this additional 80% coming on. So there will be additional measures. And I would expect them to be quite generous measures, because the government recognises that it can't be in the situation that they were in with things like the poll tax or people's worries about furlough, where they seem to be dithering and not acting fast enough. So it's a huge political crisis coming if they don't act.
Thank you very much. That's Andy Meyer, Chief Operating Officer and Energy Analyst at the IEA. I'm joined now by Age UK Charity Director Caroline Abrahams. Caroline, thank you for joining us. Who is this going to be impacting on the ground?
Yeah, well, actually, perhaps you'll be surprised to hear I agreed with a lot of what Andy said, not absolutely all of it. I think the bit where I parted company from him in particular was the notion that there was enough help already to see people through the autumn and winter. We absolutely don't think that's the case. That's not what we're hearing from older people. And obviously, we're an older people's charity, and there are 4 groups of older people we're worried about. We're worried about older people below the poverty line who claim their benefits. We're worried about those below the poverty line who don't actually get their benefits, and that's as many as 1 in 3 all in, which is a shocking figure that's been very hard to shift over many years. We're worried about people who are just above the line because, you can be a few pence over and that disqualifies you from any sort of targeted help, and those people are going to find life really tough. And we're also worried about older people whose incomes might be a bit higher, but actually have got very high costs. And that might be because they're running medical equipment at home, or they're disabled and they're having to use the washing machine a lot and things like that. So those are the groups we're worried about. But of course, actually, I think, as Andy pointed out, the scale of these price rises that are coming are so huge, so unprecedented, that even people on fairly moderate incomes, people who never expected to be in any sort of financial trouble, are going to be in difficulty this autumn and winter. So I think whoever wins the contest to be the next leader of the Conservative Party and our next Prime Minister has got a lot to do and a lot to think about. And I'm sure there's lots going on behind the scenes that we're not being told about.
I would hope so. But you're working with a particularly vulnerable demographic. For those people, will it be a case of heating or eating, for the people plunged into fuel poverty by these rising energy bills?
Oh, and the problem is, I think, as Andy indicated, really, the scale of what's coming is so great that even that won't do it. It's not even heating or eating. I think, however, generally speaking, a lot of older people are very good at managing on a low fixed income. They're very good at budgeting. They're very disciplined in how they spend their money. But however clever and savvy you are, with this sort of scale of inflation, it's just going to overwhelm people's incomes. Actually, the settlement that the then Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, gave in the spring was actually very generous to older people. We were very grateful for that. But the problem is, as Andy said, inflation's just soared beyond that ever since. That's the difficulty. So the good that those benefits gave to older people, unfortunately, are being swiftly eradicated as inflation continues to rise.
Right. Well, thank you very much for your take. That's Caroline Abrahams there, Charity Director at Age UK. You are with Calvin Robinson now, covering for Nana this week on GB News on TV and on digital radio. Coming up, we'll continue our great British debate. I'm asking, what should the government do to help you with your energy bills? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, leader of the UK Independence Party, Neil Hamilton, and broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. But first, the latest news and headlines.
Thank you, Calvin. It's 5:32. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. Some breaking news in the past few minutes. 2 men who were arrested on suspicion of murdering 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool have been released on bail. One of them, a 36-year-old from Huyton, has been recalled to prison after breaching the terms of his licence. The Chancellor has warned middle-income earners could struggle to pay their energy bills this winter, saying he's concerned about those who aren't on benefits. Speaking to the Daily Telegraph, Nadeem Zahawi said people earning around £45,000 a year may need government support. It's after Ofgem announced an 80% hike in the energy price cap to over £3,500 from October. The Met Police will be investigated following the death of a man in Kingston in southwest London last night. Officers were trying to arrest him following an allegation of theft when he entered the River Thames. His body was recovered 2 hours later. Police say he wasn't in handcuffs. The incident has been referred to the Independent Office for Police Conduct. And a car once owned by Princess Diana has sold at auction for £650,000. The black Ford Escort RS Turbo, which was driven by the Royal between 1985 and 1988, was initially expected to fetch around £100,000. Silverstone Auctions says the RS Turbo Series 1 was usually made in white, but the Royal Family Police Guard asked for Diana's to be painted black for reasons of discretion. TV online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Calvin.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. I'm Calvin Robinson, covering for Nana this week on GB News on your TV and on your digital radio. Let's go back to the great British debate. This time I'm asking, What should the government do to help you with your energy bills? Yesterday, Ofgem announced that the price cap will increase from £1,971 to £3,549 from the 1st of October. Households are feeling the squeeze, and it has been reported that a third of households are already struggling to pay their energy bills as winter approaches. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, what should the UK government do to help you with your energy bills? Before I go to my panel, let's have a quick look at what you guys have been saying. Paul says, sure, the UK generated energy renewals, nuclear can be supplied at what it costs, thus lower and not at the internationally linked high gas prices. Aaron says, we must nationalise energy, utilities, people need to live, should not be subject to profits by big corporations, especially foreign corporates who aid their own countries once they rip us off. Name one privatisation since Thatcher that has worked for the people. And Boris says, not that one I hope, the government should abolish the net zero policy, the green levy and VAT on fuel, and they should also start fracking again. I'm with you on all of that one, Boris. Get to it, please. Let's see what my panel make of this. I'm joined by leader of the UK Independence Party, Neil Hamilton, and broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. Lizzie, what are your thoughts?
Well, actually, agree totally with the last comment
with
there.
Boris?
Yeah, with Boris. It isn't the Boris. I think he's still on holiday, isn't he? Or is he back? But we can't balance environmentalism on the backs of working people. And I'm afraid I think we really should scrap the current net zero strategy. It's actually costing us. And I don't know how you feel about that, Neil, but that's what I think we should do, resume fracking. But people want to know what we can do now. And I know Rishi is all about inflation is the enemy, inflation is the enemy. Well, how about if you cut fuel duty by 25p? That will justly have an impact, won't it, on our inflation straight away? That would have an impact.
Absolutely.
And but people are worried about what to do now, and that's the thing. And we need to get the economy going. We've got people that are, can't get to their hospital appointments, haven't got fuel in their car, and then they're not going to restaurants, to the cinema. We've already seen Cineworld go under. We need to stimulate the economy, and that's by slashing taxes. That's the only way we can do it.
I'm with you. Before I go to Neil, I just want to apologise. We're all sat on very squeaky chairs today, and I think it's coming down the microphones. Sorry about that. Neil, what's your take on this?
Well, first of all, the government's got to stop doing the damage that it has been doing. Half the price of a gallon of petrol is tax. We've got these green levies to fund the absurd net zero policy, virtue signalling with windmills. All that money is going to rich developers and landowners. We've got to scrap the green levies and substantially reduce the taxes on fuel. But that won't be enough to cover the proposed price increases that we're likely to see over the winter and especially after January. Fundamentally, we've got to put more money into households to pay their bills one way or another, whether that's by cutting prices through cutting taxes on the one hand, or in the form of a cash payment, such as has already been proposed, but it's got to be much larger than 400 quid. And if you like, you could claw back some of it by making it taxable, and therefore those on higher incomes would pay some back to the Treasury in the form of taxes. But one way or another, the kind of increases that are in prospect simply cannot be afforded. If you're dependent on the state pension, 9,000 a year, I mean, how could you possibly accommodate the kind of price increases that we've got? I'm a pensioner myself, but fortunately,
don't believe it.
Fortunately, I have earnings-related pensions as well. I'm not just reliant on the state pension, but there are a lot of people who are, and they are the most vulnerable, the really elderly people. So, the government will, if it wants to have any chance of winning the next election, of course, have to do something dramatic.
But,
he or she, whoever that is.
Are we still supplying to the Netherlands and Belgium? We're still supplying, aren't we? Why did we stupidly close down our gas reserves in 2017?
Well,
the long-term decisions have been so bad, but not just by this government. On the last 25 years, it's been so bad.
Absolutely.
And they really do have to look at this and act now. And this is why we need a prime minister now, and not
Well, of course, Liz Truss has not naysayed the net zero policy. She said that she's always been an environmentalist, by which she means that she supports the deliberate policy of making energy unaffordable for lots of people and making us dependent on intermittent energy sources, which effectively have given Putin the power that he's got to hold Europe to ransom.
Well, if one of them came out and said we are scrapping the net zero policies and these green levies, I would probably support them. You know, Rob Halfon MP said that the green levies are up to 25% of people's bills. Now, Ofgem have come out and fact-checked this and said it's between 9 to 12%. But even if it's
big enough,
the lower number, it's still significant.
It's still 250, 300 quid of the average electricity bill.
Neil and Lizzie, thank you very much. This show is nothing without you and your views. So let's welcome one of our great British voices. This is your opportunity to be on the show and tell us what you think about the topics we're discussing. This hour, we're heading over to Kidderminster to speak with GB viewer John Reid. John, what's your take on all of this, mate?
Yeah, hello, Calvin. Good afternoon. Well, the rot started, didn't it, with Margaret Thatcher? Who in their right mind would nationalise? Who would denationalise an industry which we all rely on? You know, when I went to university and studied economics, I was always told that the fundamentals of what a society requires, fuel and armaments and that kind of thing, should never be in the hands of foreigners. And here we are with, for example, EDF, I believe is owned by a French company, where it seems to me the simplest answer, nationalise the electric and the gas industry, let the government control the price and let them secure the supplies, because that way we would have total control. There wouldn't be any of this giving £400 here and £300 there and messing around with tax rates and so on. They could simply decide what the selling price of the fuel is going to be. And it could be, at times like this, that they make a loss on it. But over a long period, it would always come out profitable. And I think the government has a responsibility to do exactly that. So I'm with, previously I noticed you read out a thing from a guy called Aaron, and he was saying exactly the same as me, nationalise them, and that's what I say.
I mean, it sounds simple enough. Let's let the government take over this industry and they'll sort it all out. But since when have the government been good at sorting anything out?
Well, the government are good at sorting nothing out. But since all this has been going on, we have to rely on the government, don't we? They are in control. So we have to assume that there was nobody in the government that's expert at it, but they know a man who can. I'm not suggesting wholesale redundancies or get rid of the people at the top. What I'm suggesting is that the profits these companies make, which is fortunes, more than we can ever imagine, go into the government coffers and help keep down the price to a reasonable level. Because at the moment, my own example for you, I'm 74 years of age, I'm still at work, but only part-time. However, my gas and electric combined about 15 months ago was £90 a month. It's now sitting at 285, and on the cap yesterday that they announced, I've calculated my new payments will be roughly £513 per month.
£90, John, that's just ridiculous. I think people up and down the country are feeling your pain. John, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us today. Honestly, really appreciate it. That's John Reid from Kidderminster. Thank you. So today we're asking, what should the government do to help you with your energy bills? Lots of you have been getting in touch with your views, so let's have a look at some of those emails. Ian says, I don't think the government will actually do anything significant. I'm going to help myself and reduce my energy bills by wrapping up warm. Fair play to you. Kevin says, Nadeem Zahawi should be ashamed of himself for his remark about middle-income earners suffering with their bills. There are a lot of people earning far less who deserve help. And what about the pensioners? Yeah, I don't think it's either or. I think everyone needs some kind of help in this. It's disastrous. Edward says the government should do what Labour have proposed and enforce a price freeze. It is a simple way of helping people in the current crisis. Bob says the government should abolish standing charges as these hit the poor most. It is just another cost that we have to pay. Thank you very much for sharing your views. Please do continue to do so. But now it's time for our quick fire quiz. It's the part of the show where we test what the panel has to say on some of the stories hitting the news headlines. Joining me today is leader of the UK Independence Party, Neil Hamilton, and broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. Now, remember, do not press your buzzers before I have finished the question. These are Nana's rules, not mine.
Oh, very strict. You're
not as frightening as she
I'm going in teacher mode.
Yeah.
Right, let's begin. Question 1. This week, 51 members of an activist group, Just Stop Oil, tried to make a statement by doing what? A, gluing themselves to shipping containers. B, smashing tyres on cars. Or C, smashing up petrol stations. I hadn't finished my question.
Did it again.
Go on, Lizzie.
A.
A, you think it was A?
Yes.
Gluing themselves to shipping containers.
C.
Neil, you think it was C, smashing up petrol stations. The answer was C, smashing up petrol stations. Did you not see the footage? These children smashing away. Honestly, look them all up. Show them an example. So the group Just Stop Oil launched the action in support of their demand that the UK government end new oil and gas projects in the UK, as if that's what we need right now. 51 supporters took part in the demonstrations at several petrol stations. Is this a valid form of protest?
No.
It's criminal damage.
Absolutely.
And should be prosecuted.
Why did they get away with it? They keep getting away with
because
this
the police,
stuff.
The police are doing the Macarena.
I've lost the plot, haven't they?
Yeah.
But to be fair to the police, and I don't see this very often, but to be fair to the police, it comes from on top, doesn't it? They're doing what they're told to do, right? Of course. So they should be told to go in and arrest these people.
Yeah.
Oh, totally.
It's a dereliction of duty not to.
Yeah,
They should be policing, though. They shouldn't be happening. It's just terrible.
I'm with you. Right, next question. A pensioner was dragged off a jet for smacking a flight attendant, but what drove her to such violence? A, they brought her the wrong meal. B, they took away her gin and tonic. Or C, they stepped on her toe. Neil.
B.
You think it was B, they took away her gin and tonic? Lizzie?
I think this is C. They stepped on her toe.
I think the only viable excuse there is taking away someone's gin and tonic. So answer is B, they took away her G&T. It's understandable, isn't it?
Well, yes.
The unruly pensioner was kicked off after lashing out at a flight attendant because they took away her G&T. Previously in the flight, she asked for a free champagne. Fellow passengers cheered as the woman was dragged off the plane. Poor woman. She just wanted a drink.
Exactly. You see, I always have a Bloody Mary.
Killjoy Society again.
What's your drink on a plane? You say, I love a Bloody Mary. I can't fly without one.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Do you have a drink on a plane, Neil?
Well, I'm a champagne man myself.
Of course.
I need the bubbles when I'm that high in the sky.
What's the craziest thing that's happened to you on a flight?
Yeah.
Oh, Neil.
Well, not a lot that's crazy has happened to me on the flight because I'm usually with Christine.
That's very
well
yeah. She keeps you very sensible, does she?
No, I remember just sitting there and realising, you know, when you go through the customs and I'd left a bag and I had to race off and everyone booed me.
Oh, no.
I know. And then they waited for me, though, so they were very good.
Let's move on. Question 3. One of the largest ever set of dinosaur bones has been discovered in a garden. But how tall in feet are these bones believed to be? Closest answer wins.
Oh, I see. We don't have a choice for this one, no. Ooh.
Ooh.
I don't believe in multiple choice questions.
I know, gosh.
Well, that would be a guess on my side. I'd say 12.
12?
I'd say 20.
12 or 20 feet. The answer is 82 feet.
Oh, wow.
Therefore, you get that
win.
I've got one on here.
One man in Portugal was quite surprised when he found the bones of a 160 million year old dinosaur. The bones are believed to be from a Brachiosaurus.
Well done.
Thank you. This is considered one of the largest sauropods ever found in Europe.
That's incredible.
Have either of you ever found anything interesting?
Well, we found an Edward IV groat.
Oh.
In our garden.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
That's quite cool.
Yeah. So, but it's a bit mangled. But it's not much use with inflation at current rates, of course.
You see, I used to have one of those metal detectors.
Oh, did you really?
On the beach, but I never got anything.
Imagine you going around with a metal detector.
Yeah, down Southport Beach.
Oh, bless you. And question 4. Which Baltic country has recently toppled a Soviet statue? A, Estonia, B, Latvia, or C, Lithuania? I think Neil knows this one.
Estonia?
Estonia.
Both of you, OK. The answer is B.
Oh,
shit.
We're both wrong.
The Soviet obelisk was toppled in Latvia. Latvia's foreign minister said that by taking down the monument, Latvia was closing another painful page of the history and looking for a better future. Right thing to do or provoking violence?
Well, I don't think it's going to provoke violence in Lithuania because they feel themselves to be really on the front line with Russia next door, don't they?
Sure. But do we disagree with toppling statues?
Yes, totally, absolutely against it. It's criminal damage, and that's their history. You should never be doing that. And I was actually disgusted at them doing it here, even to Winston Churchill. It was just absolutely awful.
I share your diffidence on this, of course, because although we don't want to celebrate the monsters of Soviet tyranny, that was all part of history. And
you learn from history.
I mean, a friend of mine, American, multi-millionaire, spent a lot of money going around Europe immediately after the fall of the Berlin Wall, buying up these statues. And he's got in Dallas what he now calls a Garden of Evil.
A Soviet garden.
With statues of monsters like Dzerzhinsky, the first head of the secret police, and so on.
Wow.
And I mean, people should actually see these monuments to tyranny because the message comes out from
because when Saddam Hussein's statue was toppled, I was like, good for you. But then we get statues toppled in our country. I'm like, actually, I don't really approve of that.
And we have to learn from our history and our mistakes, don't we?
Let's have the last question. I think it's the last question. Britain's top veterinary organisation has recently published an article suggesting that all vets should do what? A, go vegan. B, be paid more. Or C, have at least one pet. That was easy.
Sorry, darling. I was going for go vegan.
OK, Neil?
Well, I think I would have gone for that as well, but I'll say have at least one pet.
OK. So they suggest that all vegetarians should go vegan.
Of course.
The latest article stated that saving the lives of pets and then eating other animals could be seen as contradictory. Oh, come off it. The article also encourages everyone to consider the environmental impact of eating meat. Yes, it's good for the environment, it's good for British farmers, good for British industry. We need to eat more meat, not less of it. Is this virtue signalling?
Yeah, well, but plants can feel pain too, you know, can't
That's
they?
true, they can.
So I think we should be aware of their feelings in all this.
We don't want to.
Yeah, so you're sounding like Prince Charles now. Oh, my word.
Well, nobody's ever said that to me before.
But surely loving animals and loving your environment, part of that is knowing that we farm animals and we love them and then we eat them.
Yeah, well,
It's not a bad
But I can't imagine throwing a dog a bit of broccoli rather than a... You know, it's not the same
that's
thing.
Probably animal abuse.
It is. And, you know, dogs and cats like meat, you know.
But where do you draw the line on which animals are meat and which animals are pets?
Well, when I was a member of the Welsh Parliament, I had a bug farm in my constituency, and so I had an insect burger.
Ooh.
This sounds very WEF to me.
That's not good.
Which tasted all right, but I didn't like the texture very much. And I have had glazed crickets in Mexico and all sorts of things. I've been pretty adventurous in the course of my life. Chocolate-covered ants.
I'm not a fan of foreign delicacies, if I'm honest with you.
You see, I had a terrible boyfriend, I'm afraid to say, who served me, which I thought was chicken, and I found out it was rabbit. And I had
rabbits,
a pet
love
rabbit.
Oh, rabbit's
But
great.
I love
Rabbit,
rabbits, and I had a pet mopsy. I kept thinking,
I don't understand why we don't see rabbit more often in butcher shops, because it should be such cheap meat. Well, I have to say that this year rabbits have been very scarce on our land, so I think the myxomatosis must have come back.
Well, I think game might come up in value, actually, as we're in this
Absolutely.
cost of living crisis. People should be eating more of the animals we can kill on this planet.
on the road.
The leanest form
The
of meat.
roadkill.
Absolutely. Right, so on today's show, we've been asking, should the UK ban smoking? According to our Twitter poll, 29% of you said yes and 71% of you said no. Congratulations on being right. Thank you so much to my panel, leader of the UK Independence Party, Neil Hamilton, and broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure being with you both. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Calvin, loved it.
And I'm loving that we're calling it the UK Independence Party now. I'm loving the rebrand.
Yeah, well, let's make clear who we are.
Absolutely. Thank you to you guys at home as well. Thank you for your company. I'll be back tomorrow at 4 p.m. covering for Nana, doing the best I can anyway. No one can fill Nana's shoes. God bless her, and God bless you guys. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Well, this evening, largely dry across the country with some rain across the far northwest. Let's home in now on the detail. And a dry picture across the southwest of England throughout this evening with a few sunny spells ahead of sunset. Fairly pleasant, temperatures around 20, light winds as well. Largely dry at 7 o'clock this evening across the southeast of England. Some last glimmers of sunshine ahead of darkness, perhaps an isolated light shower too. Dry across South Wales, patchy cloud in places, winds fairly light and feeling quite warm with temperatures around 22 Celsius. And mostly dry with patchy cloud across the Midlands this evening. Perhaps an isolated shower, but many places avoiding rain. Winds light, temperatures around 22 as well. And the risk of a few light showers this evening across the northeast of England, though most places will stay dry. Some sunshine ahead of nightfall, patchy cloud, temperatures around 20. And a dry end of the day with plenty of sunny spells ahead of dusk. For Scotland, a low chance of the odd sharp shower, but many places avoiding that. Temperatures about 18. Across Northern Ireland, patchy rain and drizzle towards the north and west of the country, staying dry elsewhere. Winds light, temperatures about 18. So heading into overnight, most places dry, clearer spells this evening, but that patchy rain persisting across the northwest of the UK. And that's how it's shaping up tonight.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a life.